I'll make it 10 o'clock. We've got an echo going on here. Sorted? Okay. Yeah, good morning. Welcome to this formal meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Nigel Pepper, Chairman of this committee. Councillor Adam Stokes, Vice Chairman of this committee, is also in attendance. The audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. I would like to welcome the members of the press and public who are listening to this online. I'd also like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park and await further instructions. Before we move on with the main business of this meeting, can I remind you that if you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand? Can I also remind members of the committee to switch on their microphones when invited to speak and to speak close to the microphone and switch their microphone off after they have made their contributions. I'd also like to welcome officers presenting today who are participating live via Microsoft Teams. Can I ask that you introduce yourselves at the beginning of your item or when you make a contribution? To ask questions or contribute during the meeting, please raise your hand virtually or type speak in the chat function. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. Please can you keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise, and can I ask everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads and anything else that makes a noise are silent, please. We'll now move to the formal agenda. Item 1 of the agenda is apologies for absence, replacement councillors. Over to you, Trina, for that.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Brockway, Councillor M. Clark, Councillor N. Clark, Councillor Key and Councillor King. We've also had apologies from Councillor Mrs. Bradwell, who's the portfolio holder responsible for communities. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm right in saying we have got low numbers, but we are correct, so we can carry on with the meeting. Yeah, thank you. Item 2 then, declarations of councillors' interests. Do any members wish to declare any interest which may have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest forms? If so, please tell us now. We're okay with that. Okay, so item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the minutes of the previous meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee held on the 27th of July, which is pages 5 to 18 of the agenda. So I'll just go through those briefly. So page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and finally page 17. Do I have a proposer and seconder for those, please? So Councillor Stokes. Councillor Gray, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. There's potentially a long agenda this morning, however not as long as the last time we met, with one pre-decision item. I'd therefore like to ask officers to only summarise the key points of their reports and what is required by the committee, and regard to members of this committee to stress the importance of concise questions and contributions. We've got Councillor McNally here this morning. Is there anything you'd like to mention, Councillor McNally?
Thank you, Chairman. Now I've got no announcements to make at all.
Okay, thank you. And we've got Councillor Corey online, I believe. So, Councillor Corey, anything from yourself? Oh, are we muted, Councillor Corey.
Yeah, I've just taken my glasses off. I need to pop them back on. Thank you and good morning. I'm really happy to update the committee on the Ermine Community Hub. You may remember that this was raised as a question a few weeks ago by Councillor Mrs. Lee. So I'm really happy to update that we have approved a provider to take over the management and responsibility of the community hub, and the provider is Bishop Grosseteste University. We're now entering discussions with them over the lease agreement and the service level agreement, which outlines areas of support both from ourselves, Lincolnshire County Council, and Greenwich Leisure, the GLL, who, as you know, run our core libraries. Introductions between Bishop Grosseteste University and representatives of Greenwich Leisure have already been made, and once the opening date has been confirmed, we'll let everybody know. I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but I do have to leave shortly to join my fellow exec members.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. We do have one question for you from Councillor Lee. So over to you, Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Councillor Corey. I'm really, really pleased to hear that. And I know it's the question, they always ask it of nurses and doctors, how long? Any idea about a date? Because local people will ask me, and just, I'm not telling you off, but I'm Councillor Lee, and I'm certainly not a Mrs. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, Councillor Lee, I owe you a huge apology because I get really ratty with that myself. I'll remember next time. I am going to invite Will Mason's in this meeting, so I'm going to invite Will. If you've got any further details for Councillor Lee on any dates.
Morning, everyone. Good morning, committee. We don't, whilst, as you said, Councillor Corey, we don't have a specific date. I think it's important that I kind of confirm that we are doing everything we can to make it happen as quickly as possible. Whilst I wouldn't anticipate that it will be weeks, because as I'm sure everyone is aware, we will need to go through the process of making sure all of the correct legal documentation is in place. We are confident that it will happen. Well, certainly as winter seems to be approaching, certainly this calendar year. But we are very keen, we're very aware that actually those people that are used to using that hub have been without a hub during a period that when we have been able to reopen the rest of the community hubs and our core libraries. So we are putting every resource we can in place, and in fact, to that end, we did start some of the conversations with our colleagues in legal prior to the agreement being finalised to make sure that we can do it as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you, Will. Thank you. Okay, are there any other executive councillors out there wish to make a contribution at this point? If so, please speak now. No, no one else out there. Okay, thank you. Senior officers, are there any officer announcements from the lead officers, such as Lee Surdyfield, Mark Baxter, and on behalf of Nicole Hilton, Dawn Colson, etc.? Any lead officers wish to speak? No? Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the agenda proper then, with the agenda item 5, which is the service level performance reporting against the performance framework 2021 to 2022, quarter 1. This item is on pages 19 to 58 of the agenda pack and brings together the quarter 1 performance for community safety, fire safety, libraries and heritage, road safety, trading standards and volunteering. The report will be presented by Sarah Barry, Head of Safer Communities, Will Mason, Head of Culture, Lee Surdyfield, Assistant Director Corporate, Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer, and Stephen Batchelor, Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership Senior Manager, who I believe are all attending today via Teams. We'll do it in the order it's in the agenda pack, and the first one is domestic abuse. So is that Sarah taking that one?
Yes, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
Sarah Barry, Head of Safer Communities. I'm standing in for Di Coulson, who's Assistant Director of Public Protection this morning. So again, the indicator we have for domestic abuse is flagging as red. unfortunately, we've been working really hard to try and get a good indicator to show you the performance of this the really important service, and we've been working hard to get a decent indicator. So we have agreed with Councillor Bradwell that we'll remove the target from this indicator, as it was originally based on the number of people who were referred to the service, and we feel this doesn't give a very accurate picture of the number of people who receive service. So actually what you're seeing reported is the number of people and children who actually receive service rather than those that are just referred. There are sometimes people who are referred who didn't actually want the service, and that might have come through a third party such as the police. And then there are a number of people who the service isn't appropriate for, and they're sort of moved to somewhere more appropriate. And then there are some people who, although referred, just don't want to engage with the service. So we think it's really important that you actually get a reflection of the number of people who've actually received support from the service. What I can say, although the measure is flagging red, and as I said, we will be removing this as a target and we will just report the numbers. We are really comfortable with the number of people who've received service. It is at expected levels. We've been working with Eden Links, the provider, very significantly over the last 12 months, and specifically during the COVID period. What we do know in Lincolnshire, actually, that doesn't show up in this information, is that Lincolnshire residents haven't experienced higher levels of domestic abuse during COVID, unlike some other areas of the country. So along with that information and along with working very closely with the service, we're comfortable that this figure is an accurate representation of service provided. I think I'll leave it there, Chairman, and if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. No, I'm looking, everyone seems content with that, Sarah, but just before I move on, it mentions MARAC Plus trial. So for the benefit of the committee, can you just tell us a little bit more about that, please?
So MARAC, the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conferencing, is what we refer our high-risk domestic abuse victims into, and it's a multi-agency approach. Now, we have a number of victims of domestic abuse who continually are being referred into that as a process. The MARAC Plus pilot was to try and take them out of the normal MARAC and try and spend a bit more time trying to problem solve, I suppose, and try and protect those individuals in a slightly different way. The trial has now closed and we are rolling back from that. We aren't going to continue with the MARAC Plus. It was seen as not really adding value and not providing anything else other than what MARAC was. So we are going to replace that with an escalation process for those very difficult and complex cases. And we'll be able to provide more information about that when we update you on the new domestic abuse partnership and duties that the County Council has.
Okay, Sarah, thank you for that. We've got a question come through for you from Councillor Dunny. So over to you, Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you like me to stand or just, if I put the question, should I stand?
No, stay seated. Yeah, sorry.
I'll coming back. Last time you asked me about my question, and I think we missed it, is how many domestic abusers did we register in Lincolnshire, and how many of them are not registered because the abused didn't wish to press charges against the abuser? If we can get that figure, maybe.
Okay,
Thank you.
Able to answer that now, Sarah?
No, I'm not. So they would be police figures. I think we have to be careful about our responsibilities as the County Council are about providing support to the victims of domestic abuse, whether they report to the police or not. And also we fund a project looking at the perpetrators of domestic abuse, but actually the police are the main agency for dealing with reported domestic abuse crimes. Some of that information will come through the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board when we report on that.
Okay, Thank you, Sarah. Okay, the next set of performance figures is for fire. So, fire and rescue. Is Mark Baxter there, please? Good morning, Mark.
Yeah, good morning, and welcome. If I may, I'm going to hand over to Assistant Chief Officer Ryan Stacey, who heads up our performance reporting and monitoring for fire and rescue, to just give a quick overview on the report, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, thank
Ryan.
you. Assuming that everyone's read through the report, I'll just draw councillors' attention to a couple of areas. First of all, primary fires. So these are fires involving property. We're meeting our target. There has been a small increase in incidents over last year. However, we are maintaining a downward trend over 5 years. Fires in fatalities in primary fires. So this is fires again in property. We've had 2 this year, although only 1 in the current reporting period. As with all of our fire fatalities, these will be subject to full review, and we will learn the lessons as a result of those, and any lessons learned will come back to this group. Deliberate property fires, we're not meeting our target here, although we're only 3 incidents outside our tolerance. This is a stretch target, and again, we are maintaining a 5-year downward trend. Likewise, with deliberate secondary fires, we're outside our target again there. We're working very closely with City of Lincoln, particularly around fly tipping, and we're pleased to be able to share with you that Lincolnshire Police have made an arrest of an individual relating to 6 deliberate fires as a result of our close work of our fire investigators, our arson task group and Lincolnshire Constabulary. I'll be more than happy to take any questions that anyone has on any of those figures or any of the other figures that are in the report.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Over to the committee. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to thank the fire service for all of the hard work. Always got a special place in my heart, and I know what an outstanding job they do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions filtering through, Ryan, but on page 25, the increase in number of dwelling fires from 80 to 96, attributed to deliberate dwelling fires. I guess one thing they probably don't take into account is more dwellings are continuously being built. So I guess over a period of time, there's inevitably going to be more dwelling fires anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, so yes, inevitably it is. We work very hard with the areas that we consider to be at risk, which is why we also report a figure there, which is per 100,000 or per 10,000. So we can give a trend analysis
Sure.
when it's compared to the increase in building of houses. Clearly for us as an organisation, it's the pure numbers which matter most to us because they're a lot more meaningful than 0.63 per 10,000. It's a lot more meaningful to us and our staff to look at 93 deliberate dwelling fires versus an abstract figure by comparison, but we do provide the comparative figure there as well.
Thank you, Ryan. You mentioned on page 29, Ryan, about a person had been caught for 6 deliberate fires. I think they was the straw stack fires, if I got that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned trends on page 29. Could you briefly outline for the benefit of the committee what a typical trend in a deliberate primary fire is, please?
The causes are very diverse. So in some areas of the county, we have a trend analysis which will result in things like hate crime. So there can be, so these, bearing in mind these are property fires, so these can be vehicles or dwellings. So it is possible that we end up with trends relating to almost, I'd hesitate to say gangs, but that kind of thing. And likewise, typically they result in vehicle crime. So it's either vehicle crime, which has resulted in the setting fire of a vehicle, or that kind of thing. At the minute, there's such low numbers that we haven't got any trends particularly that we're able to analyse, but we continue to monitor them right the way across the board to make sure that we're putting our resources in the right place, protection as well as prevention.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. It's not a criticism in any way at all, but of the deliberate fires not achieved targets, can you tell us just a bit more about those, just how that works and if you think there might be a reason for that. Thank you.
So our deliberate fires are divided into, we categorise them in two ways. There's deliberate property fires and there's what we call deliberate secondary fires. So these would be things like refuse containers, stacks, that kind of thing. The causes of those are varied, particularly, and it varies right the way across the county. This time of year, we tend to end up with a lot of seasonal variation in terms of the figures. So we tend to end up with a spike in deliberate fires over the summer period because there's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more opportunity for either younger people to make mischief, and that ends up with secondary fires. Likewise, fly tipping of garden refuse, etc., can lead to an increase in the number of fires that we get. We do an awful lot of work with local authority, both district and county council, to reduce those instances of fly tipping and ensure that we're cleaning up local areas to ensure that there aren't those opportunistic abilities to cause fires. But we would always recognise a seasonal trend. Last year and the year before being very, very interesting COVID years, where of course we ended up with a lot less because there are a lot less people about, but it ended up shunting some of our deliberate fires a little bit later in the year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee wishes to come back.
Yeah, I did ask, is there a reason for not achieving that target? Is there a resource issue or anything? Thank you.
It's partly down to a stretch target, so the target changes, so it's not a static target. This year we sought to reduce the number of deliberate fires more than there were last year. So actually the number of deliberate fires that we've had this year is only 3 or 4 different to there were last year. So we're not seeing a difference in our resourcing. We're not seeing a ginormous amount of difference in the number of fires. What we have seen is a more stretched target that we're seeking to achieve. So ultimately we're trying to be better and drive down the number of fires. We've not seen a significant increase, only a moderate increase.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Sneath. Over to you, Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for late. Trouble with travel, I think, would it
We wondered if
describe
that was
it?
the case.
Yes. Just looking at the number 2 of the recommendations, we've got the capital scheme business case for the expenditure of the capital budget. Might this be badly affected by supply issues, the cost of everything going up all over the world, metal, wood, etc.? And if so, how could that affect things going forward in the next few years?
So, sorry, Councillor Sneath, which page was that?
I'm on page, right at the beginning, 65. I've only just sat down, Councillor Chairman. I'm only on the first page at the moment.
Was that page 65?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll come to that, I think, in due course.
Oh, will we?
Yeah?
That's fine then.
Yeah,
Sorry. Having only just arrived.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Out of
Just for
touch.
information, we're presently on agenda item 5.
Oh, sorry.
And we've taken it as it comes through. So we've done, what was the first one we did in there? Was domestic abuse. We're now on fire in the agenda item 5. So we'll come to that in due course, yeah. Okay, yeah, no further questions for fire and rescue. I have one. The graph at the top of page 32, Ryan, it looks to me that every year since 2014, quarters 1 and 2 have the higher rates of deliberate secondary fires. I guess that's attributed to things like longer days, lighter nights, grass is drier, etc. But is there any other reasons why every year quarters 1 and 2 are higher than the rest?
I think ultimately you've entirely hit the nail on the head there, Councillor Pepper. That's exactly the reason for it. It's a trend that fire and rescue services all over the country see, and it is exactly attributable to drier weather, longer days.
Okay, thank you. We don't appear to have any further questions for you, Ryan, so we'll now move on to libraries, performance figures for libraries. Have we got someone there to present that, please?
Yeah, good morning again, Councillor Pepper. I'm happy to take this one forward.
Okay,
Will Mason, Head of Culture. I'm afraid actually the performance reporting for both heritage and libraries is very much similar to the Q4 reporting from last financial year, in that it being Q1, it covers April, May and June, and for about half of that period we were still within some of the national restrictions, which has had an effect on our performance. Very briefly, the main impacts of that have been that we didn't see the kind of expected in-person visits into our libraries during Q1. whilst obviously the increased digital engagement that we've had during the lockdown and been incredibly successful with means that we did still actually exceed the kind of the web hits performance target. The third of the library targets is around community use. Due to the national restrictions and the easing of the restrictions during Q1, we hadn't actually restarted community use of our libraries, either the community libraries or the core libraries. So we did miss that target for Q1, although I am very pleased to announce that actually during August we did restart with the Summer Reading Challenge, and in September we have started our kind of community use of libraries and activities again in earnest. So we are still kind of for Q1 seeing the impact of the restrictions. I am pleased to say, however, that in terms of moving forward, we are seeing library interactions increasing month on month.
Okay, thank you, Will. Any questions for Will? No, I can't see any questions. Will, clearly COVID really has had an impact on all three of your library performance items. Could there possibly be any other factors over and above what you've mentioned?
We don't believe so, no. Obviously, libraries as a service, our staff are really close to our users. It's kind of a really kind of wonderful interaction that we have with the communities of Lincolnshire. So we're able to kind of pick up on people's feelings very closely. What we also obviously, unfortunate timing is we were just completing the rollout of the library IT upgrades across the county just as we went into lockdown, which actually would have had a positive effect on our engagement, because we were going to have sort of, or we do now have sort of faster computer access and improved kind of Wi-Fi access and new printing facilities across all of our libraries. So we would have seen, I believe, an actually increase in performance were it not for COVID. We're very aware from talking to our users that there is still a lot of nervousness amongst library users, as I'm sure everyone appreciates. Library users, a large proportion of them are of an older demographic. So we are, I would say, still quite cautious about when we feel we will return to kind of pre-COVID levels of in-person visits. And this was actually perfectly exemplified by the Summer Reading Challenge. Obviously, this happens every year. It's incredibly popular. What we were finding this year was that people were coming in to collect the kits and then they were taking them home. They weren't staying on the library to engage with the process there. Obviously, there was a lot of kind of national press over this going to be a difficult winter and a bad winter for normal flu, etc. And I think we will still see a lot of caution in terms of personal visits to our libraries for the next few months.
Okay, thank you, Will. The next performance figures is heritage. I guess that's back over to you, Will, is it?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. It's still very, very similar. So in terms of the measure that covers our kind of both our in-person visits and our kind of interactions through website, phone calls, social media, etc., we have been hit very heavily by the fact that our heritage sites were closed until halfway through May. So half of that quarter we were down, even though our digital engagement again has been very successful during lockdown. Since reopening, it has been a better picture. We're still very much, as I believe I covered kind of at the last scrutiny, reflecting the national picture that those sites that have an outdoor offer are doing very, very well. So sites like Lincoln Castle, as we've moved into kind of Q2, are still slightly down on interactions pre-COVID, but actually in terms of some of our other performance around financial performance, etc., are actually up. But then the second of the performance indicators, where we actually get the customer feedback about how we're performing, how people have enjoyed their visits, etc. Again, during Q1, people were not picking up the paid performance to say whether or not they enjoyed their visit, which we completely understand. They have now started picking those up in the last month or so. But what we've done in absence of that data is made sure we're keeping a very close eye on TripAdvisor, which is a wonderful guide to how people are actually kind of responding to their visits to our heritage sites. And I'm pleased to say that all of our sites are still receiving overwhelmingly very positive reviews on TripAdvisor.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I can't see any further questions for you, so sorry. Oh, sorry. Councillor Dunny's got a question for you. Over to you, Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just regarding the heritage. I would just like to understand how the county works with other small towns in Lincolnshire, because there is a lot of things to offer around Lincolnshire. On the top, what we have in Lincoln, for example, in Boston, we have gems. We have some history in Boston, which is unbelievable. And I do find that a lot of people, they don't know even that Boston exists in Lincolnshire and England before the one existed in America. So it's astonishing when you found out such thing from the public. So are we working all together to promote other places in Lincolnshire, or we are just focusing on what we have in Lincoln? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Danny. Will, did you want to take that now or wait until agenda item 6?
I can cover it now. It will get covered
Okay.
slightly in Agenda 6, but I think it's a slightly broader question, so I'm happy to answer now. I think it's an absolutely valid question. The history of Lincolnshire is just incredible. There is literally no period of history where Lincolnshire, it doesn't just have an incredibly rich series of stories to tell. Obviously, Lincolnshire County Council's culture service, including heritage, our remit, is very much one to showcase the county's rich heritage. There is a reality, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that our physical presence is quite Lincoln-centric. We do have some aspirations that were briefly covered in the paper that we'll talk about shortly, to actually try and work closer with some of the other heritage officers around the county. There are some other mechanisms in place as well, where all of the different heritage officers do try to work together. So there's organisations like the Lincolnshire Heritage Forum, and I'm on the committee of that. There are various tourism bodies where we try to work together, and a few other aspects I'll cover again in the paper in the moment. It's a very, very tricky nut to crack. We are a large county. We do have an amazing history. It is important that we don't stick to just where we have the physical sites. As an example of that, we've just actually started the second of our local Lincolnshire Wildlife Photography of the Year exhibition. So this is one that mirrors the national exhibition, where we've invited people of Lincolnshire to send us their photographs, and then a judging panel chooses the best, and then they turn into an exhibition. And last year we put that exhibition on at the Collection Museum. This year, before it goes to the Collection Museum, it's actually being shown at the North Sea Observatory out on the coast. And we do work as well with some groups. So we have done some work in Boston, actually through the Arts Council funding that we have, in terms of reaching some different audiences in Boston. So you're absolutely right. Whilst it's more challenging where we don't have a physical presence, we do try to do as much as we possibly can. Boston in particular does have an incredible history. We've never actually had a Heritage Lincolnshire County Council presence in the town, but we do absolutely acknowledge it's something we want to do more of in the future.
Okay, thank you, Will. Okay with that. Okay, thank you very much. The next set of performance figures is for road safety. So, Stephen Batchelor, are you there?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Steve Batchelor, Senior Manager at the Road Safety Partnership here in Lincolnshire. As with the last update I provided, the figures reflect the limitations that we had on traffic and personal journeys throughout some of the coronavirus restrictions. That led to a significant reduction in the number of people killed or seriously injured between January and March 2021, listed as 53, and in comparison, October up to December was 138. Similarly, the first fatality that we had in the county in 2021 was on the 20th of March. So that was the longest period from the start of the year, calendar-wise, that we hadn't had a fatality. Unfortunately, as the roads have opened up and more people are getting back into vehicles and taking journeys, we have seen the number of fatalities increase. And whilst we're at this point in time still less than we've been in any of the previous 5 years, it's higher than obviously we would like based on that very good start. The numbers similarly are reflected in the number of children killed and seriously injured as well, again with a reduction from the previous quarter of 7 down to 4. What we're clearly going to be focusing on, as things have been opening up and people are taking more journeys, is trying to monitor and ensure that vulnerable road users are not disproportionately affected, working to get back into schools and make sure we're providing education to children, and also doing our Too Fast Too Soon production, which is aimed at young and new drivers, and trying to ensure that they are as safe as they possibly can be. I'm happy to answer any questions that there might be in terms of road safety at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No, I can't see you're going to get let off light there, Steve, but clearly COVID's had a major impact with less vehicles on the road and has skewed your figures.
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Sure. Okay, next set of performance figures is trading standards. Have we got someone to present that, please? Who is that? No one there?
Sorry, Chairman, it's Sarah Barry.
Sarah, I thought it might be, but I didn't shout your name out. Sarah, okay.
Okay, so looking at the figures we've got for trading standards, it's pleasing to report that the activity around illicit tobacco products is now back on track. Although the sorts of places selling these products were open during lockdown, our ability to actually visit was, and the intelligence we were receiving was limited, and the partners that we visit with, such as police licensing, were busy doing COVID restrictions. So I can say our activity is now upped, and we are back out there visiting premises where we get intelligence, and unfortunately we are still finding illicit products. We are taking a number of different actions to try and address this activity, including taking action against landlords to where there's been a pattern of activity of illicit sales, to warn them regarding the potential for money laundering. And we do think this is having some effect, but we do have a lot of these outlets, and so it will take time to have a major impact. So I'm not sure if there are any questions regarding that.
Okay, any questions? No, can't see any, Sarah.
Okay, so the next indicator is around unsafe products removed from the market. And again, this was an area that was curtailed during COVID lockdown, but we're back out there and certainly looking for items. The number of items can vary greatly depending on the type of product and the type of place, whether it's a warehouse or a retail stall. But again, we are seeing a number of unsafe products being removed. And as we're now back in places like markets on the East Coast and car boot sales, that is sometimes where we find these types of products, but not always. So we will continue to see activity in this area. If there's no questions on that, I'll move to the final measure on high-risk premises.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so high-risk premises is slightly lower than the target, but we would always expect this in Q1. Some of our high-risk premises are farm-based visits and inspections, and we tend to avoid farms during the summer period as they're really busy with harvest. So it's likely that the numbers will even out over the year.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Councillor Danny, you've got a question for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just because of talking about the trading standards. And we do believe that we have a lot of Eastern European shops around our county. Does the trading standards deal with these kind of markets, which is mini markets? Because some of them, they really have meats coming from abroad. I don't know what's the regulation on that coming in. I do believe, according to the EU, some of the products shouldn't be here because they're not coming from the EU itself. Some of them coming from Russia, some of them coming from Turkey. So I think I'll just repeat my question to the trading standards. If what's the regulations towards this product, and are there any frequent visit to these many supermarkets in our towns in the county? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danny. Sarah, are you able to answer that one,
Thank
please?
you, Councillor Danny. That's a really good, pertinent point, that we are very aware of the range of stores that we have in the county, including the Eastern European supermarkets. And we do visit those as part of our routine inspection plan. Our routine inspection plan these days is actually based on intelligence mainly. So where anyone has got concerns, we would like to know about them. Just to be clear, we also work closely with our environmental health colleagues based at district councils. There is a division of responsibility between environmental health, who will look at the safety of food, and trading standards that look at the standards of food. So that is what it says it is. Does it contain the right ingredients? Does it contain any contaminants? So that's sort of roughly the division of work. There are a lot of these places. I can't say that we can get round all of them, but based on intelligence, we will visit those of most concern.
Thank you, sir. You've answered my question. I was going to ask you about the crossover between district councils and county councils, so we've cleared that one up for me. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you. Right page now. Just a point about, you mentioned visiting car boot sales. Are you only looking at new goods? I'm just thinking of an example. If you got to a stall that was selling stuff maybe from the 70s or 80s that was now banned because of substances in it, you know, even if there are only one or two, would you remove those from sale, insist they were removed from sale, or because they were vintage, would you still allow them? Thanks.
It's a quite technical part of the legislation, in that I presume we're talking about consumer products safety legislation. It only applies to businesses selling those goods. So if it's an individual who's just attended the car boot clearing out their attic and their garage, then it probably wouldn't apply. But any business, and that includes some that are attend car boot sales as part of a small business, we would be looking at for example, the toy safety, the electrical safety, and the legislation applies to second-hand goods as slightly differently than new goods, but it certainly still applies.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, you mentioned on page 51 a list of unsafe items, electrical items, cosmetics, clothing, furniture and toys. I'm not sure if perfume comes under cosmetics. I'm not into that sort of thing, but I'm told there's a lot of counterfeit perfumes around. Are they generally unsafe?
Yes, so perfume is cosmetic. A cosmetic is anything you apply to the skin, and as perfume is, you do apply it to the skin. And where we find counterfeit items, especially perfumes, makeups, some of the ones that are branded with the luxury brands, we are concerned for safety, as sometimes there's high alcohol content in them, various, we have found lead in some of the makeup products. So it is an area of concern for us, linked to counterfeit goods.
Okay, thank you. Can't see any further questions. Sarah, a few years back, committee members were shown some typical counterfeit items. I'm just thinking now we have a new committee, would that be possible to bring some samples to us at some time in the future? Not necessarily amongst the performance figures, but when it fits the agenda.
Yes, certainly. Certainly once a year we will report generally on trading standards activity, and we can certainly bring some examples of the things we look at for safety to the committee. I think that's quite a good idea. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We've got Councillor McNally with us. Any comments about trading standards whilst you're here? No, and that's okay with yourself to bring some items, typical items to committee, yeah?
Yeah. Totally agree.
Okay, thank you very much. The next set of performance figures is from about voluntary groups. Who have we got taking that?
Chairman, it's Lee Sodyfield, Assistant Director for Corporate Services, and I'll
morning, Lee.
present voluntary groups and volunteers performance information. So, as you'll see from your pack, in Q1, 378 volunteers were supported to access volunteering opportunities. This is green, it exceeded the target. When you compare this to previous years, you'll notice that the number supported was actually slightly lower than we've achieved in previous years. And the reason for that is a slowdown in certain activity, particularly in relation to volunteers supporting the vaccination centres. So whereas in previous quarters, demand for that was high, as the vaccination scheme has rolled out and progress has been made, the number of volunteers required has started to step down. What we've also now starting to see is people coming forward for longer term volunteering opportunities again, and we're starting to see the sector open back up again. But obviously that is a slow process, and mirrors many of the comments that you heard from Will Mason in terms of libraries and other areas, such as heritage. The recruitment is focused at the moment on high priority areas. These include things like retail volunteering, scouting, befriending. There's also an increased need now for trustees. Many trustees moved on during the pandemic, and the VCS and LCVS are supporting organisations to attract trustees into their bodies. The VCS have also supported 335 groups during Q1, and again, this is green and above target. What you see here is support, particularly around practical advice and resources, online forums, coffee mornings, along with funding advice and training, and that's to help people to apply for and bid for funding to bring money into the county. As part of that, 12 funding workshops were delivered, and that received very positive feedback from those that were in attendance. So that hopefully provides you with a useful overview of the volunteering and voluntary sector performance, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to congratulate and recognise the great work that VCS and LCVS do. I mean, they really do great work across the county under normal circumstances, but during the pandemic, they have provided a very, very valuable service to lots of these community support groups that set up and did great work. And if it wasn't for the help and support that was given by these two organisations, I don't know quite where we would be. So I just think we should send a big congratulation and recognise and a shout out to those organisations.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gray. It's a very pertinent point, and I think it wouldn't be remiss if a letter of thanks went to a lot of these groups from this committee. But over to you, Lee, for your thoughts on that.
And I completely agree and endorse everything that's just been said. The VCS and LCVS have been a tremendous support throughout. They've been an active player within the community and voluntary sector cell, both through the response and the recovery phases. Most recently, as other parts of the public sector have faced pressures, CVS and LCVS have stepped in to source volunteers in quite difficult times, and I think their contributions have been tremendous. We're also seeing them respond extremely well to us asking for greater levels of detail and information than perhaps our grant agreement would require them to provide. And I know I'm due to attend one of their meetings either later this month or starting next month to look at how we continue to build and strengthen the relationship that we have with them. But completely echo Councillor Gray's points.
Okay, thank you, Lee. So we're okay to send a letter to the voluntary groups recognising their efforts and let them know we're extremely grateful for the work they've done. A suitably worded letter, Lee.
Yeah, I'll draft that for you.
Okay, thank you. No other comments. Okay. That takes us to the next item of the agenda, agenda item 6. Future of the Heritage Service in Lincolnshire. This report is found on pages 59 to 62 of the agenda pack, and it provides the committee with an update on the actions undertaken in regard to the recommendations relating to the future of the Council's Heritage Service, approved by the Executive on the 3rd of September 2019. The report will be presented by Will Mason. Over to you, Will.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pepper, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to come back again this year to talk about those kind of actions following on from the recommendations. Very much aware that for a couple of years now we've been talking about the future of the Heritage Service, but given that it's been a couple of years since the executive recommendations, we are actually in a position where the future is now. So I'll just give a very brief update on some of the kind of key actions that have happened since I last provided an update this time last year, and then I'm happy to take any questions. The first and quite significant change that happened at the end of October last year, following the service of notice to English Heritage with regards to the fact that Lincolnshire County Council previously operated Gainsborough Hall, which is actually owned by English Heritage. The management and operation was handed back to English Heritage. As it was handed back during lockdown, some of the committee members may recall that did have some implications in terms of it not being a seamless transition, where it was open to the public one day under our auspices and then open to the public under English Heritage the next day. But I am pleased to be able to announce that although we no longer operate it, it is still an important part of this county's heritage and its visitor offer and its community offer. And it did reopen in July of this year. And I'm also very pleased to announce that some of the staff that worked at Gainsborough Hall under Lincolnshire County Council have been successful in securing positions with English Heritage and will continue to tell the story of that wonderful building. Following discussions recently between the County Council and the City of Lincoln Council, I'm pleased to announce that, subject to the formal agreements being made, which we are working very heavily on at the moment, the Usher Art Gallery will remain open as an art gallery, and the collections, the museum and art collections that belong to the City Council are going to remain in Lincolnshire, and Lincolnshire County Council will continue to look after those collections, which also has the very important bonus of that it means that the collections that are owned by the city stay together with the collections which belong to the county, i.e. those collections that we've gathered since 1974. As a result of the new arrangement, we will continue to run the Usher Gallery as an art gallery, but the new arrangements will allow us to use the space more flexibly. So we are very positive about being able to use the Usher Gallery for more community, cultural and creative industry work, including some income generating activity, which will be very important in terms of helping support the long-term sustainability of the gallery as an art gallery. That hire is likely to include cultural talks and tours, weddings, ceremonial celebration, as well as educational and children's activities as well. The two authorities are also committed to working together to look at securing additional external funding, bringing more funding into Lincolnshire and Greater Lincolnshire to invest in both of those buildings as well. With regards to other considerations from that executive paper, and very mindful of Councillor Danny's comments, work does continue with regards to some of the other attractions under our management and ownership around the county, although there has been a knock-on effect of COVID in terms of the speed that some of this has been happening. I'm pleased to announce that we have put been part of a joint bid to secure some funding to do some essential works for Alford Mill. And if successful, once those works are completed, we will be in a position to move forwards, as there is a group in Alford or a group of organisations that have come together in Alford that are very interested in taking on the mill as a community asset transfer, which will improve the engagement with that mill. I'm also pleased to say, and the timing of this meeting is very positive, that although there has been no third-party interest in taking on Ellis Mill, which is behind the Museum of Lincolnshire Life at the top of Lincoln, we did open it through volunteers this weekend that has just passed. So this is the first time that we've been able to open it with the use of volunteers since before the lockdown in March last year. And we had over 200 visitors on both days. This has been very heartening, and it's been wonderful to engage with volunteers, new and old, in telling the story of that mill to the public. and we look forward to being able to open that mill up more next year as well. With regards to Stamford, at the moment we operate a quite static heritage display in the library, which we call Discover Stamford. Conversations have been ongoing for probably the best part of 2 years, and again this was hampered by COVID, with a third party in Stamford who want to do more with the stories of Stamford. We have so many incredible villages and towns around our county that have a heritage that isn't fully done justice to, and the third party we are working with is very, very keen and has been for a long time, but I'm pleased to be able to share that they've actually had the initial successful conversations with Arts Council England about moving to an accreditation status, which would allow us to move forwards with either a handover of some of the collections telling the story of Stamford that are in the County Council's care, or some new longer term loans, so that that local organisation can actually increase and improve the offer of engaging with the public in the story of Stamford. Those are very briefly the key highlights of what's happened in the last year. I'm very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Will. Before I open up for questions, I realised that we didn't do a formal vote on the performance figures. I think it goes without saying was all in favour of that, but I'll just go back to that and say that I move that the committee receive the report and are satisfied with the overall performances of the services. Could you please raise your hand to that if you agree? Thank you. Just to keep the records straight. Okay, so any questions for Will on the future of the Heritage Service, please? Councillor Lee.
Thanks. It's not a question, it's just a couple of comments. First of all, I was really pleased to see about Ellis Mill and hear that there were hundreds of visitors over the weekend. I used to live in the West End of Lincoln and I know how popular it is, so hopefully that will go from strength to strength. Very pleased to see that. Obviously it's popular. The second thing, with regard to the Usher Art Gallery, I am just so hugely relieved at what has happened. I don't actually agree that culture has to be income generating. I think culture, you know, everybody should be able to access culture. And I just think for Lincoln, the Usher Art Gallery is such a crucial part of our heritage. And it's really good to see the councils working together on this. You know, that's grown-up politics. I'm a good friend of Lord Cormac, and we both were really worried about what was happening there. So the fact that it's been sorted out and it'll go on, I'm just so relieved, and just a huge well done to everybody that was involved in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Gray.
Yes, just adding on there from Councillor Lee. She's absolutely right. It's great to see that the officers from the two authorities have worked so very close together. I know discussions have been fraught at times, but I think a shout out needs to go to Councillor Lindsay Corey. I know from personally chatting to her that she's really done a lot of work to try and make these things happen, and now they are happening because that formal agreement has been secured. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the executive member.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I was Heritage Champion for 4 years here, and I am still at South Holland District Council. And something following on a bit from what Councillor Danny said, I think councils working together is great, and I'd like to think that we could consider letting some of the wonderful treasures that districts have handed over, but they're stored at the county council archives and whatever, or underground at the collection, that some of those could go back to places. You've talked about it happening at Stamford. Things might be going back, but I know South Holland would love some of the stuff from our area, some archaeological stuff, for example, to go back to South Holland, and it would relieve pressure in the, wherever they store everything. I can't think of where it is now. And I'd like to push for that, a little bit more freedom to let stuff go back, because we would love to be showing it in Spalding and South Holland altogether, and yet it's hidden away here. And I think that's something for the Heritage Service to consider. And I did suggest this a while ago, but I still think it's important. And if we're going to have a new Entente Cordiale, let's have it with district councils and share stuff. That's what I'm getting at, Will.
Yeah. Good point. Your thoughts on that, Will?
I 100% agree. As I mentioned earlier, you know, our remit is to showcase the county's rich heritage. And when we talk about the county, I'm talking from the Humber to the Wash. It is wrong. I absolutely acknowledge that the collections telling the stories of parts of our county, whether it's Spalding, whether it's Stamford, whether it's Grantham, which is another museum that we have been in conversation, whether it's at the coast, that those items are in Lincoln, and in many cases they're not only in Lincoln, but you're absolutely right, they're not on display in Lincoln. So we are 100% open to any of these organisations taking more of the collections, whether it's on a short-term loan, a long-term loan, or another agreement. We do have to balance that slightly with the fact that we have a responsibility for generations to come, that we look after those collections. So we would need to be assured that that actually the conditions under which they're kind of displayed in other parts of the county do still match what we require. We are an accredited museum service, so obviously we need to make sure we abide by the correct ethics and standards. But we would welcome any kind of conversations with people about getting those stories out there. You shouldn't just have to travel to Lincoln to hear the story of Lincolnshire. I completely agree, and anything we can do about that, and as that's what's happening in many sectors, is that we're all using that phrase of the blended approach of how we do that. There's lots of different ways to do that, but one of those absolutely should be about getting those collections out to other parts of the county as well. 100% agree. Very happy to have any side conversations about that as well.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Will. Councillor Morn.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Corey's just had to leave for another meeting, but I thought it'd be appropriate for me to just make a couple of comments on this item. And firstly, thank you, Councillor Lee, for your positive comments regarding the Usher Gallery. I know that Councillor Corey, Will, and all his officer team have worked tirelessly over many months to get this formal agreement in place, working to a very tight deadline at the end of this month as well. So I think it's right that we acknowledge the hard work from both the County Council and the City of Lincoln Council, get around the table and get an agreement in place. That's really positive for residents in Lincoln and across the county. And Councillor Sneed, thank you for your comments as well about sort of sharing some of those heritage artifacts and assets that we have. I think there are formal arrangements in place that items can be loaned out and displayed around the county. So there are those mechanisms there. But I know, for example, we've had meetings with South Kesteven District Council in recent weeks to discuss more formal arrangements as well with them. So, please do come forward if there are organisations and councils that want to help us share that story, as Will says, then please do get in touch, and I'm sure we can facilitate those discussions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question, which is knowing, and as far as we're concerned, a lot of sites around Lincolnshire, they are opening only part-time, and some of them you have to book before you come to visit the site, which is, it happens in Boston. And I do think that these factors contribute probably to damaging the reputation of the sites, because if people come on certain days and the site is closed, or the museum is closed, they will not come back probably until next year, or they may go, we went and it was closed, it wasn't good. Are we doing anything about that? Because we have crowds of 60,000 people in one football game, and we cannot accommodate probably 20 people or 15 people in one site. Are we connecting with other towns and villages regarding this matter? Thank you.
Okay, Will, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite right, Councillor Danny. We are still in a position as a sector across the whole of the country, and no doubt in other countries as well, where there is still a bit of variance in the approach to reopening. Whilst obviously the restrictions have been reduced, there is still government guidance in place with regards to groups gathering indoors, which is a very different situation to sort of outdoor music festivals, football stadiums, etc. So I know some heritage attractions around the county are still having some restrictions in place with regards to that in terms of those that come under my remit. It does mean there is still some limit, for example, with visitors to see the Lancaster, Spitfire, the Hurricanes, and all the other planes at the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Visitor Centre, as we have to go into the hangar, and the RAF are still having kind of, you know, expectations around mask wearing, and because it's quite a limited space and it's an indoor space, we're still quite conscious, and the public is still quite conscious about you know, being gathered very closely together during the tours, which last 45 minutes plus. We have a similar situation with the archives, as I kind of explained earlier, with regards to you know, people coming indoors with libraries. We actually had a discussion about what's happening outside of our heritage sites yesterday, and we've actually reached out to the East Midlands Museum Service to try and gather some data about what's happening not just across Lincolnshire, but about what's happening across East Midlands, so that all of us can get a kind of a better understanding of how this is varying as well. The other aspect, though, that I think is still significantly impacting on not just our sector, but I'm sure lots of other sectors as well, which is why not all heritage attractions have returned to pre-COVID opening, is that our income has been massively hit in the last 18 months. So, for example, closing Lincoln Castle during all of April and half of May, and then still having to kind of, you know, see the numbers increase month on month, means that the income we would ordinarily expect to see is lower than it would have been without COVID. And as a result, given the fact that we still have limited budgets, what you're finding both in terms of the culture service for Lincolnshire County Council and across the sector, people are trying to manage their costs. So there is that balance between, if everybody went back to pre-COVID opening, but then not getting pre-COVID income, then that could actually have a very significant impact. Now, we have a lot more protection being part of the County Council. We've been very successful in the last 18 months of drawing down COVID grants to help support with that. Some smaller organisations outside the County Council have had a lot of success drawing down external grants as well, but often those grants are only in place if attractions are at risk of going out of business in the next 3 to 6 months, and not all of the other attractions are that bad, but they're finding that to ensure that they don't get that bad, they're not going to the full reopening. There is definitely some evidence, having looked at the visitor figures for the last couple of months, that even where we're not opening as many days of the week as we used to do, for example, you know, Museum of Lincolnshire Life and the Usher Gallery, there is a degree of displacement. So some of the people that might have come on a day that we are closed are still coming on a different day. And we are monitoring the kind of the feedback and the comments that we're getting. Is it an ideal situation? No, it's absolutely not. When will we get back to pre-COVID opening hours? I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I think we're trying to remain flexible so that once we feel that we're in a position that from a budgetary position we can open up longer hours again, we absolutely will do as quickly as we possibly can, because that's our remit, to ensure that obviously we're engaging with as many people as possible in the stories of the county. I completely accept the comment earlier about, you know, I think it was Councillor Lee that sort of said it shouldn't be just about kind of income generation in culture, but it has to be about financial security and financial sustainability. And that is not just for the County Council's heritage attractions, but across the sector, still an impact. Everyone lost a lot of income during the last 18 months, and part of the response of that is not yet opening up to those pre-COVID hours.
Okay, thank you.
May I come in, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Councillor Donny.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be advisable if we use a pre-booking system probably, and make the public aware that there is a limitation for the numbers indoors, and that way they will understand and book accordingly on the times? Thank you.
Yes, we do that at the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Visitor Centre, and we do that at Lincolnshire Archives, which are the two sites that have the biggest constraint in terms of numbers, because there's a long dwell time in the same space indoors. We still encourage part of the kind of visit Britain's kind of initiative about getting people back into cultural facilities has been this kind of kite mark of, you know, we're ready, we're open, we're back there. And there is still a great degree of encouraging people to book in advance, because it helps attractions estimate how many people are coming. Increasingly, since we've reopened in May, less and less people are booking in advance at places like Lincoln Castle, the collection, etc., where they're aware that actually that booking in advance is no longer essential because there aren't any restrictions on the numbers. But at sites where there are restrictions on the numbers, and I know this from my own personal kind of, when I'm not running cultural sites, I'm visiting them myself. So I absolutely agree, and I see that there are particularly some of the smaller attractions are still operating that kind of pre-booking system, or at the very least encouraging it. If there's capacity, we never want to be able to turn people away, but pre-booking does help. You're absolutely right.
Okay, Councillor Danny wishes to come back.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, because I talk from experience, and I will always use myself as an example. During, I think, 4 weeks ago, we went to Bath, and it's a sort of a masterpiece, the Romans baths, and it was cramped with people, and there were people everywhere. Okay, there were a system where you follow and you go all around and you come back. It was good, but it was a lot of people inside. So I don't see why for us here we cannot use the same systems and have our heritage and our sites open probably on daily basis, because we just stated now, they're not making any money. They may close in 6 months. They may close probably within the next 2 months. And if they close, is a loss for us, because we're not going to have our identity proposed and shown to the other people. So if Bath can do it, why we cannot do it?
Councillor Danny raised some good points there, so are you able to answer that, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's completely valid. It is interesting in some places. I've seen it myself. You're absolutely right. The number of people going seems to pay no sort of notice of the fact that there are still some kind of advisory guidance from central government in place about indoor spaces. But the big difference, and I'm kind of speaking on behalf of more than just my own sites in terms of kind of my sector knowledge. But one of the big differences there is if those attractions charge an admission. So a lot of heritage attractions don't charge an admission. So if they open more days, they don't necessarily, and in fact almost certainly never, generate enough additional income to be able to cover the costs of opening additional days. So sites like Lincoln Castle, we have no capacity limitations. We do have some physical limitations in terms of people getting into the Magna Carta vault. But you are seeing, again, I think, a difference between where there's an admission charge, everyone wants to open up as many days as possible to be able to get as many people back through, which is why, whilst we may only be at kind of 3 days opening at the Gallery, at the Museum of Lincolnshire Life, 5 days opening at the Collection Museum, we went straight back to 7 days opening at Lincoln Castle. And the big difference there is that's the attraction that has an admission charge on it. So we will see that financial return that justifies opening, much as you do in Bath.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morn.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to support what Will's saying there, and I think members, perhaps need to remember as well that the council is, across all services facing, financial difficulties and has done for some years, and heritage services do have to balance there, but it's right that they do that. And I think the service does that extremely well. We have extremely popular sites such as Lincoln Castle. It's managed superbly well, generates a lot of income, and that then supports the other sites that we have. And it is, I think Councillor Lee alluded to, it's not just about the money side of it, and that's absolutely correct. We have a lot of heritage and a lot of history to tell, a lot of culture in our county, but it does have to pay for itself. And I think we have an extremely competent and good officer team that manage that extremely well, and mapping the demand on each site and making sure that where there is a demand for a site, it's open and it's available for those people to see, and equally making sure that we've not got staff in a site sat doing nothing with no visitors. So we're making sure that they're open at the appropriate time when visitors want to go and see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will, you mentioned in your report that external funding has been applied to address the works at Alford Mill to return the site to full operation. Dobson's Mill, that was the 5-sailed windmill at Burley Marsh, it suffered extensive damage in February 2020 when the sails was blown off in a storm. Are you able to give us an update on the renovation of that, please?
Yeah, I absolutely can. That was a very timely question, Councillor Pepper. The mechanism to actually apply the insurance claim against that dreadful damage actually went to the resource board. I've just got back from 2 weeks holiday, but I believe it happened last week. And that got a positive response in terms of the way forward with that. We are still facing the reality that for most of the last 2 years, there hasn't actually been any millwright in the county, which means that there are more than just the 4 mills that the Lincolnshire County Council is responsible for, and all of which need works on them. So there is going to still be quite a delay on how long it takes to do all of the works to all of the mills. What we've been discussing with our colleagues in property with regards to Dobson Mill at Burley Marsh is that actually to prioritise the work to the ancillary buildings, which are the old granary buildings, because there's an amazing group of volunteers there, and particularly the head volunteer over there. And what that will allow them to do now that the mill, although in best will in the world, I would say this time next year probably won't have had its sails replaced. The entire top cap was removed. We need to look at what we do in terms of, do we do that first? Do we do Alford Mill first? Because there is an option to make a significant change at Alford if that one is done first. But what we've shown with Ellis Mill, which it doesn't have the full working sails either at the moment, because it did suffer some incidents over high winds as well, and we had to take a lot of the slats out while we look at some of the safety of that mill. Mills are beautiful, but they do take a lot of care and a lot of attention. But what we showed with Ellis Mill is that actually you can still tell the story of a mill even if the mill isn't grinding flour anymore. And what we're talking to the volunteers over at Burley Marsh about is making sure those ancillary buildings are open, so they've got somewhere to base themselves. They've got the little cafe, the little shop, the displays that they have in the granaries. They've got all of the passion and enthusiasm that the team have there, so they will be able as soon as possible to start telling the story of that mill, even though it's going to take, and I've got to be honest, we're not talking months, it could still be years before all of the works are done to Heckington Mill, to Burley Marsh Mill, to Alford Mill, to Ellis Mill, and those are just the 4 mills that Lincolnshire County Council owns that need works to them. So it will take some time, but we are keen to make sure the stories are still told while the repairs are done.
Okay, thank you, Will. Can't see any further questions. Can you confirm that, Councillor Stokes? No further questions. Okay, so the actions of this committee is to approve the continued work towards delivering against the recommendations approved by the Executive in September 2019. I'm going to move that the committee receives and approves this report and the continued work towards achieving the deliverables agreed in September 2019. Can you raise your hand if you agree, please? Okay, all in favour, no one against. We'll now move on to item 7 of the agenda, which is Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Technical Response Unit Refresh. This is a pre-decision item on a proposed refresh of the Fire and Rescue Services Technical Response Unit capabilities to deliver successful outcomes. The report is found on pages 63 to 142 of the agenda pack, and the decision has been taken by the Executive in October. The report has been presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer, via Teams. The views of this committee will be reported to the Executive when it considers a decision on the 5th of October. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll give an overview of the report. Very conscious of the fact there's quite a lot of technical details in regards to the appendix. I've also got Area Manager Spencer Creek, who's also on the line, who's been the author and the responsible officer in regards to putting this project together, who will also be available for any technical questions. So if I just give a bit of an overview into the background. So we've come up to our capital replacement programme which relates to our current technical response unit vehicles and also our command support vehicle. And what we've done some analysis is to, rather than just do a replace like for like programme, we linked into our integrated risk management plan and the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years to really get an understanding of where the risk lies in various areas of the county, particularly relating to our technical rescue response. And what we've recognised is we've been able to highlight where in the county we have the greater demand for our technical rescue response, where we're likely to have the greatest risk. So that has enabled us to be far more intelligent led in regards to where we want to put our future assets. So what that is, looking at the recommendations, we've focused on the technical rescue capabilities that are our animal rescue, large, bariatric response, heavy rescue response, large transport response, technical rope rescue, water rescue, and our command support. And what we've identified is where is the best place to put those assets, but also the type of vehicles that we require, with the outcome being that what we would like to recommend through the work that's been done is that we will replace the units with 7 bespoke vehicles, and including command support units that will be on more locations around the county. That will ensure that we've got a far more intelligence-led response. And this is based on 5 years worth of data in regards to historical response across the county. It's also been based on our FRAM mapping, which we use to identify risk within the county. And we've also done some significant stakeholder engagement, both with our crews and other specialist areas, to ensure that we've got a rounded view in regards to what is happening at a local level and where we think the best place for those assets are. We have recognised that actually the recommendation has not been based on any budgetary issues or any cost savings or any other monetary areas, because actually, in fact, what we've looked at is a resource to risk, and what we've recognised is that the impact of looking at this capital replacement overall will actually give us a slight increase on our revenue commitment to the tune of around about £24,000 a year. However, that has enabled us to also satisfy some of the technical changes that DEFRA have brought in regards to how we train and how we ensure we got competence on our water rescue. That has realised a significant increase on the capacity of our current water rescue team members. So actually the outcome of the whole of the project has reduced that potential revenue pressure that could have been up to nearly £170,000, and it's reduced it down to a £24,000 revenue pressure. However, as I said at the beginning, the purpose of the whole of the review wasn't in regards to any budgetary savings. It was purely in regards to ensuring that we've got the right resources in the right places of the county to ensure that we can meet the current and future needs of the communities of Lincolnshire. So that's an overview, Chairman, in regards to the actual project. I'm happy to take any questions, particularly in regards to any of the technical data, etc.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We know that we got an outstanding question from Councillor Sneath. So Councillor Sneath, then Councillor Lee.
Reading other bits, I've now sort of answered my own question, actually. But I do want to come in on page 68 about a comment there. Data shows the county has 98 farms. Do we mean the county council has 98 farms, or do we mean Lincolnshire has 98 farms? Because I would have thought if it was the county council has 98 farms, we could find that information quite easily if they are farms with animals.
Okay, I must admit that's something I'd highlighted, so
Good.
over to you, Mark.
Thank you. I'll refer that question to Spencer Creek, who's put together that data, if that's okay, please, Spencer.
Yes, good morning, everyone. The data refers to the amount of farms that we've got identified on our risk data systems. So it's farms within the county of Lincolnshire.
Oh, okay.
What I would also add to that, councillors, actually, in regards to they're on our risk data schedule, that is also the farms that we would class as in the higher risk areas of the county. Absolutely recognise there'll be far more farms than that are actually around the whole of the county, but it's actually specifically that we would class that would be in our high risk areas.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Can I just enlarge upon that then, Mark, for the benefit of this committee? Which farms would go in that classification of high risk, and what would put them in that category?
So it's a mixture of data sets that include there's a historical data. It also includes is where they're located in regards to demographics of the county. It will also be what we have been informed of, what they will be storing on the farms, of any high risk storage of agrochemicals, etc. That all put together would identify them as, and I'm also cautious of our language compared to what that may be out in the public when I say high risk. We just class that as a high risk in regards to this is something that where we need to be aware of. So when we're responding to, or we've got response assets, are appropriate to if there was an incident at that farm. I would just like to caveat the language. I wouldn't want it to be seen or said that those farms are routinely operating in a high risk environment.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a bit of clarification, really. I totally understand what you're saying about this not being a financial decision, and that, of course, if you've got evidence over a number of years that your resources are needed more in one area than another, then it makes sense to put them there. Totally agree with that. But I just wanted just a bit of clarification, because my understanding is, and correct me, I think this is still right, that you do an awful lot of water response, and I mean, how could you not? And the threat's growing with climate change, but you're not funded for that. But there are some other things listed in this report: large animal, bariatric, technical rope response, large transport and heavy rescue. So can you just clarify if you've got a legal requirement to respond to those? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but if there is a legal requirement, and if so, do you actually get resourced for doing that, or is it something that you just have to find out of the budgeting that you're given for tackling fires anyway? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, interesting question. Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really interesting question, and not without its complexities, I may add. So in regards to our statutory duties, we have within the Fire Service Act a statutory response to respond to fires, to respond to RTCs, but also linking in with Civil Contingencies Act, we have a responsibility to respond to significant emergencies to the public at the county of Lincolnshire and beyond. So what we are recognising that we will respond statutory duties to incidents that actually, as and when we arrive there, we don't always have a full appreciation of what we are actually responding to. And it's absolutely right that we've got the right resources and training to for our staff to be in a position where they can do the best they can for the public. So an example being with large transport, we have a statutory duty to respond to RTCs, road traffic collisions. So those road traffic collisions can be very varied and wide, and especially within the county of Lincolnshire, we have the A1 going through, and we have an awful lot of transport goods going through the county. It is absolutely reasonable and an expectation that we will be responding to and have to deal with large transport. So that's the reasons why we would want to ensure that we've got the right skills for those. The water rescue is probably the most significant subject in regards to statutory duties. Yes, absolutely. We don't have a statutory duty to respond to flooding incidents. However, we do have a statutory duty to deal with large-scale events that will require more than, that goes beyond the scope of any one single agency that are able to meet those demands, and that is in the Civil Contingencies Act. So as you're all aware, is we know the significant risk that we've got within the county of flooding and water rescue. So it is absolutely right that it is expected that we will respond. So if we need to respond, we need to make sure that we've got the right training and equipment. What's probably changed and what's emerged over the years of how we've had water rescue within the county of Lincolnshire is actually the type of resources that we need. And what we had the information and the risk data probably about nearly 10 years ago now, was that there was a perceived need to have far more boats that had engine capabilities, that are able to go in fast flowing water, and that was deemed the standard that was required. As we've learned over these years from operational incidents and far more intelligence-led data, that's not necessarily the case. The crafts, the boats, the equipment that we need is more to do with wading, low-level water, wide-scale flooding that's enabling us to reach people in their homes to get them out of the risk area. Yes, we still need boats with engines to get us through flowing water, but the majority of the commitment that we're going to need to get people out of the risk area to a place of safety is absolutely more low-level, static water, wading, and getting people out of a risk area through the flooded area to a place of safe, dry land. That's what we're requiring now. So that's why there's been a change in regards to the type of water rescue assets that we need. And again, one other area which I will probably touch on is bariatric personnel. We know that the community of Lincolnshire, as with the rest of the country, is changing. And again, we have a statutory duty to go to fires, to go to rescues. It is absolutely reasonable to expect that there will be people in those areas that will be classed as bariatric. So absolutely right, we need to have the resources and the trained staff to ensure that we get them to a place of safety. I hope that kind of answers the question, Councillor Lee, but because I know it is quite a complex subject in regards to understanding what is our actual statutory duties, but also what is also our moral obligations and what is the best thing that we can do for the people of Lincolnshire.
Okay, thank you. Mark, when we talk about rope rescue, we tend to think of use for something high, and indeed you mentioned structures and things like that, but it also has a use for rescuing people low down, for instance in a sewer. And in fact, one of the respondents towards the back of the report quotes that there's mine shafts, rail shafts and various other crevices. Has there been any occasion in the last 5 years that rescues have been carried out from the deep, so to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm going to refer to Spencer in regards to the technical details of the amount of, although I do believe if we have, it's very low numbers.
Yes, thank you, Mark. To answer the question bluntly, it is no, we've had no rescues from deep. And I think the recommendations that we're putting forward is that since our technical rope team first came in, we've also made advances in other areas of the service which will allow us to do those rescues from deep and from height, utilising the station rope rescue and also the aerial ladder platforms, which allow us to actually go down as well as go up. So there are developments in other areas of the service that have kind of made technical rope rescue within the county of Lincolnshire no longer a usable option.
Okay, thank you. On page 70, I think it's 70, yeah, quite high up there, we mentioned Woodall Spa attended one incident, which was water response. I couldn't see Woodall Spa mentioned anywhere further. It wasn't in the table with the infographics. What happens to Woodall Spa? Does it keep that capability or not?
Spencer, would you like to?
Yes, no, the reason why we've put Woodall Spa on there, because that was a high profile incident where sadly a family lost their lives following a a vehicle going into the River Witham near Kirkstead Bridge. Whilst we've included it in the data, ultimately it was a one-off event that did occur, and actually by the team at the time having a boat, following on from that incident, the team did have swiftwater rescue training, and since that incident they've not had any others since. The reason they were highlighted in the report was down to the fact that they've had such low levels of inactivity, and therefore the risk data and the historical incident data doesn't fully support them, in our opinion, that they should be carrying on with that skill.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It just, since we're talking about rescues, I just would like to ask a question which is related to the Witham River in Boston. And on Town Bridge, we have, our town bridge in the center of the town basically is a beautiful bridge, but when there is no water in the river, the sides of the river, they're full of mud and they're very wet. And lately I have seen people they are a bit drunk, if not saying they are very drunk. They keep looking down at the river and sometimes they bounce. And I always have these flash things coming to my head. If somebody falls in the mud, are we able to rescue the person within a time? Especially if he falls on his head, I think it will be no time for him to breathe. Or if he falls straight, the legs down, I think they will be just going through the mud like nothing because it's so wet and so damp. It just always I think about the rescue of that person. So can the gentleman just enlighten me and tell me if things happen like that, will we be able to save the person? Thank you.
Okay, Mark, over to you.
Yeah, we are aware of that that particular risk, and in fact, as we've responded to that type of incident in that area on quite a few occasions, unfortunately. So I suppose if I can give you a bit of a broad overview, and then I'll probably will bring Spencer in because I know he's had some experience because he used to be the divisional commander over in that area. But yes, we have got the capability to respond to that. We have inflatable paths that we can get to those areas, and they can be inflated within a matter of seconds, and that enables us to be able to walk across mudded area to ensure that we can get to casualties. We can even we can put several of them together to ensure that we can reach across. We have inflatable hose that we can deploy that can reach out to casualties so they can hang on to them to ensure that they don't sink any further into the mud. And we also we routinely check around those areas to look at particular site access to ensure that we can get to particular areas around the town bridge at various times of when the tide is in and out. So the crews are quite familiar on how to get to the nearest access point with the equipment in there. To say, can we save every single person? That will always depend on the circumstances in which they have entered that area of the River Witham. But again, to give you some assurances, the local crews have responded. They do site checks to ensure that they have a full understanding of how they would respond into those types of events. Again, Spencer, is there anything else you'd like to add on that? Because I know you've worked in that area.
Yeah, just to add to that, obviously with regards to the proposal where we're going to maintain our swiftwater rescue teams with a powered boat, 3 of the 4 are based on the tidal flow rivers within Lincolnshire, of which the River Haven going underneath the town bridge at Boston is that part of the river. It was considered because we do still get a high level of activity, like the Chief Fire Officer says, and it is something that the crews practice as part of that swiftwater rescue training that they do. They do annual training within the local RIS to prepare for those kind of events, and it is something that the Boston crews and the Spalding crews are well versed in because they do back each other up. That's the other thing that we've tried to do as well, where we've got Our swiftwater rescue teams, not only have we got them on the key locations on the tidal flow rivers, but we've ensured that they are close to one another to make sure that we've got a backup in case one of those crews needs further support at that incident.
Okay, thank you. Can't see anyone else. Just turning to the rear of the report. The respondents, presumably they're all from within Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue. Page 128 at the bottom of that, there's quite a report on there about, quite a write-up about large animal rescues, and mentions various things in there. Have all those things been took into consideration from that particular respondent?
Spencer, you've done the analysis on that, if you'd like to respond on that, thank you.
Yeah, so in regards to the engagement with regards to our staff, which is what you're referring to, Chairman, is, yeah, we have looked at all of the points that have been considered. We've obviously balanced that in relation to the levels of risk, the levels of response timeframes that we require to respond to these incidents. The animal rescue one is quite an interesting one, coming back to the point that the Chief Fire Officer raised and statutory duties. The main reason we go to the large animal rescues is to support and prevent members of public going into a dangerous situation where they might not have the training and support, but morally feel that they need to do something. We go to try and prevent them from being injured and going as that trained crew. So the comments that have been raised as part of that internal engagement was reviewed as part of the joint working group before the report was put together, so that we could determine whether our proposed solution still did meet the requirements and the needs, and we were satisfied that we were able to satisfy all of those comments that were raised as part of that engagement.
Okay, thank you. I'll pick on some of these because sometimes those at the grassroots level sometimes have a better understanding and a full understanding of these matters, and I'll just pick out one or two. On page 133, there's I think 3 respondents there, all mentioned incident command support, and thinking that they say there that Sleaford would be a better place for it. Are we sure in your proposal you've got the right stations for it?
Spencer, would you explain this one first, and I'll come in afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we are confident that we've got all of the assets in the appropriate locations based on the levels of risk. The point that I feel that was raised at Sleaford in regards to some of their comments was initially the fact that they're obviously going to lose some of the level 3 technical skills that they've currently got. However, the bit that we're really mindful of is that they are also our level 4 urban search and rescue teams. So it's about ensuring that the workforce are able to maintain all of the capabilities to the required standards to maintain competence. Where we've identified the locations for the items such as command support, where we want to move away from in relation to command support, which is what we've got now, is that we have a level that is probably seen as technically higher than what is delivered at every fire station. What this proposal will do is it will deliver command support right from the first attendance at an incident on a fire appliance all the way through to a larger incident. What the new proposal will bring is the structures and equipment to allow that to operate in a larger environment. So the capability doesn't really change, but what actually happens with command support is the ability to be able to do that from the very first attendance, no matter how much the incident scales up, can be achieved. So by having the command support capabilities where we've located them, actually does provide great geographical cover for the county.
Okay, thank you. Just one more for me on page 135. In the middle of that section, it says, it seems unwise to make one of the quietest hold-time stations even quieter by removing all of the specialisms that it holds. At the same time, busier stations are gaining more specialisms and even more incidents. there is no allowance for the fact that these busy stations are more likely to be occupied at other incidents in the pump and so unable to respond to specialist incidents. I must wear my glasses all the time, really, mustn't I? I suppose that's a consequence of moving things around where they're best placed, but I suppose that can happen, where some stations get busier and some get less busy. But I'd just like to know your thoughts on that one.
The initial assessment that we did, we've obviously taken into account all of our activity. So we reviewed over that 5-year period, not just the technical incidents that we went to, but all operational activity. Because of the great work that we're doing with some of the protection and prevention work in lowering the number of incidents within the county anyway, the improvement in the way in which local businesses are managing their own risks now, taking responsibility for managing their risks, it has reduced our operational activity. So whilst I recognise that one of the stations might seem themselves as not being particularly busy, we are confident that where we have placed our assets in the future, that we will be able to manage whatever the demand is. We also work a very flexible model in regards to crewing at the moment, so that allows us to move resources around the county where we need them. So if we were to get a particular incident in a particular place, we would do exactly the same as what we do now. We mobilise the nearest, and then it is the next nearest that goes to that incident. So it's about providing the support to the incident that's ongoing at the time, and then recognising and potentially realising cover-up moves that we might need to do to cover any shortfall gaps. And that's a role that our operational control room do on a daily basis through the support of the duty managers.
Okay, thank you. Can't see any questions. Could you just enlarge on the page 141 then, because I don't think we've touched upon that too much about the capital plan. The 1,218,000, blah blah blah.
Yeah. So that's our within our current capital plan that has been identified, which is a accumulation of the replacement of the current 7 vehicles, the rescue boats, and the command support unit. And the rescue support units that we've currently got. So the concept is rather than, as I said at the beginning, just doing a like-for-like replacement of what we've currently got as vehicles, we propose as well we will pull that capital replacement programme, and we're looking at going out to a tender, recognising we've got a 1.2 million ceiling to look at procuring the proposed assets out of that existing capital programme.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Forgive me if you've mentioned this, because I've just been reading this and I might have not heard you talk about it, but page 135, and looking at this, the response was by a whole-time fire service person looking at it. What is vitally important is that the service must be able to acquire, maintain and resource these additional skills for the crews, etc., etc., and talks about urging Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service to request additional funding from government to enable proper resourcing, and also for firefighters to receive financial recognition for the skills applied, etc., etc. I just wondered if that comment could be noted, please. And I wouldn't expect a response from it, unless you want to give a response, but it's an interesting comment, and it's come from quite a substantial percentage of the people who've responded. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the last paragraph of page 135. Mark, any comments on that?
I do recognise that in regards to, as with the whole fire sector, and it's linked into recently that being involved in it is the comprehensive spending review that we put forward through to Home Office and the government in regards to the fire sector, that we'll be requesting additional funding to support all of our statutory duties, and not just in with regards to our response arena, but actually our statutory duties to do with our protection, strategy duties and also within prevention to ensure that all fire and rescue services are able to meet our functionalities as set out within our IRMP. So I will observe that I'm not surprised to see that comment in there, because absolutely I recognise that everybody would always look for to the government to look at ensuring if we can have additional funding. As a Chief Fire Officer, it is my responsibility at the very first stage is to ensure that we're actually utilising our current resourcing and our future resourcing in the most effective and efficient manner in the first place. But I suppose all I would comment in that we have fed into the sector comprehensive spending review to ensure that we can look for additional funding across the whole of the sector to meet our future risks.
Chair, just to add to that as well, and for firefighters to be properly paid for all of those extra skills that they use so very often as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I think it's fair to say that Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue have got some of the best fire appliances and equipment in the country. Is that a true statement?
I think the same. We have been very well supported in regards to our equipment, our PPE, our vehicles, and yes, a statement I would suggest we have got some absolutely first-class equipment and vehicles. Many services are behind in regards to the advancements in technology that we have invested in regards to our equipment, which it does put us at the forefront in regards to our response capability. The area that we know we continually need to work on is ensuring that we've also got the right people resources to ensure that the equipment and the vehicles are able to always be available when they're needed by the public.
Okay, thank you. I can see no further questions. Can you confirm that, Councillor Stokes? Okay. So the actions for this committee is that we're invited to support the recommendation to the Executive, and 1, approves the operational changes specified in Table 1 of the report. 2, approves the capital scheme business case for the expenditure of the capital budget of 1.218 million on replacement vehicles, equipment and other assets in accordance with the Technical Response Unit's capital plan at Appendix J to the report. 3, approves the carrying out of procurement to secure the replacement vehicles, equipment and other assets as described in the Technical Response Unit's capital plan at Appendix J to the report. And 4, delegates to the Chief Fire Officer in consultation with the Executive Councillor for Fire and Rescue and Cultural Services authority to take all decisions and detailed steps necessary to give effect to the above decisions. See, it does go better when I've got my glasses on. So I'm going to propose that the committee supports the proposed recommendations and agrees to pass on our comments to the Executive. Do we have a seconder for that, please? So Councillor Stokes seconds. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Yeah, that is unanimous. Thank you. I believe the next item is the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. Cara, over to you for that.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So the committee work programme is an item that enables you, the committee, to comment on the content of your own work and to ensure that scrutiny activity is focused where it can be of greatest benefit. Members of the committee are therefore invited to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in this work programme. The only change that I wish to report to the issued work programme comes on the 14th of December's meeting, where item 6, where the committee is sitting as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee, the item Modern Day Slavery Annual Update has been slightly amended. The title now is Serious Organised Crime, Fraud and Modern Day Slavery, and it will be delivered jointly by Claire Newborn, Acting Joint Head of Safer Communities, and Vicky Solomon, Community Safety Strategy Coordinator with lead for serious and organised crime. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cara. No comments? Okay, this committee is invited to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Well, no further comments, so I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 143 to 148. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Thank you. All agreed. We now close that part of the committee and we reopen as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee. It's agenda item 9, Stay Safe Partnership Annual Update. This item is on pages 149 to 154 of the agenda pack and considers an update on the Stay Safe project, its achievements to date and future plans. The report will be presented by Claire Newborn, Community Safety Manager, via Teams. So if you're there, Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to brief you work of the Stay Safe Partnership. Our Stay Safe intervention in schools is a key part of our prevention strategy here in Lincolnshire. The Stay Safe Partnership is really well developed. It's been in the county since 2015. Lincolnshire County Council leads the work of the partnership. So it provides coordination and delivery in schools with our key partners who are specialists in their field. So if I could just draw out some salient points in terms of my report, you'll see on page 150 there's a table that summarises the interventions that are delivered to our young people in secondary schools in the county. We're not complacent in the partnership, as I say, it has been running for a number of years, and we learn from our experience, we learn from feedback from children and young people, from professionals, including teachers, and from what we know about the areas that are likely to present the greatest risk or threats to our young people particularly as they move into adulthood. And so actually some of these workshops are fairly long-standing, but you'll see at the bottom of the table that actually what happened fairly recently is that for years 9 and 10, so kind of 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, we withdrew antisocial behaviour because obviously the hope is they would have received that kind of intervention and messaging in the previous years. And we've replaced that with input in respect of county lines and knife crime, so that's a standard feature in terms of our input in schools currently. So the partnership to date has delivered its kind of prevention messaging to 186,000 students and teachers across those years. Obviously, kind of 2019, the latter part of 2019-20 academic year and this most recent academic year was significantly affected by the government restrictions, COVID-related restrictions and school closures, understandably. It gave us a limited ability to deliver to pupils in a classroom setting, but the partnership responded really well to that and kind of developed a virtual offer to schools, so that certainly by October 2020, so the start of the most recent academic year, we were able to engage with pupils and teachers through the virtual platform. You will see though that, so what that did mean is the most recent academic year, there has probably been a bit of a drop in terms of overall reach to pupils, but I'd hope the committee will understand what's brought that about really in terms of COVID-related restrictions. But nevertheless, it's still really impressive, I think, to see that what that has meant is that we've still reached 14,164 secondary and 7,159 primary school pupils. which, as I say, given the challenges, I think is still really quite a good reach. You will see that there is a table, sorry, going back to page 151, there is a table there that gives you kind of some trend data, so you can see over the years the reach of the Stay Safe partnership. I will point out, because there may be, well, some of you that will notice a bit of a jump from years 2016-17 to then 2017-18 onwards. There may have been other contributing factors to that, but what we do know probably contributed to that as well is that prior to 2017-18, we trialled a charging model for the work. So we were actually charging schools for the delivery of the Stay Safe days. What that did mean is the reality is that some schools then didn't opt for any of those Stay Safe days in terms of bookings, or they looked for modules perhaps that were free or cheaper. And actually the decision governance-wise, the partnership agreed to drop the charges for the Stay Safe days. And what you'll see is what we saw then in 2017-18 was a 92% increase in bookings as a consequence of that. And we've maintained that increase in bookings from there on in. We have a really healthy take-up, and every year it increases still further in terms of our Stay Safe days. So does it make a difference? What we do is we look at the impact, we try and gauge the impact of the messaging. So we do collate qualitative and quantitative data. We do give questionnaires to both pupils and teachers, and I've given you some extracts of that student and teacher feedback. We ask them about their satisfaction of the material delivered, and when I say satisfaction, that's about the delivery method. So there's some, if there's any learning for us there in terms of how engaging it was and how interactive students particularly find it. We also asked about if they felt the information was helpful, because that's critical. If it doesn't feel that it improves their level of knowledge on the subject area, then clearly we're keen to know about that. And actually we also then gauge and ask them if they feel it would help inform their future actions and decision making. And across all of those strands, we comfortably exceed our own targets of 93%. So we're really pleased with that. As I say, we're never complacent. We're always asking for feedback as to how we can improve the modules. If I can just finish by saying then that we do make good use of our partners, as I say, who are topic experts. We find this is really helpful. Certainly in terms of dealing with disclosures, we do have, and I've mentioned that on page 153, at the top of page 153, we do have a number of disclosures, not just from pupils, but sometimes from teachers, in terms of the subject matters, particularly around healthy relationships work. And obviously the providers are then able to support the individual at point of disclosure, along with the safeguarding teams within schools, and then also obviously ensure that they're offered and access support, ongoing support, after the disclosure outside of school. So that's another added advantage. So in terms of future development, again, as I said, what we have done is moved to now a blended model of delivery. So now we're able to go back into school classrooms. That's great. And a lot of schools are really keen for us to do that and have been waiting for us to do that. But equally, sometimes for us and for them, it is helpful to continue to be able to undertake the work virtually. So now we've moved to a blended model of delivery where we offer the schools both, and we have a bit of a mixed take-up of both. One of the things we want to do, though, is to be able to assess the impact of delivering this work in a virtual setting and whether there's a difference to the face-to-face delivery. So we'll be focusing on that in the coming year. The other thing we will be doing, and we are doing currently, is just sense checking whether those modules are still relevant modules for our children and young people currently. The analysts within the community safety team are currently undertaking a strategic assessment that will add to the information and feedback we receive from teachers, from professionals, and from young people and children themselves about what things they feel are the greatest issues for them currently, and that will help inform our decision making going forwards. Some things that, just to advise you, some topics that young people tell us they are dealing with the most is around knife crime. Mental health is often raised, and again, that's something that we do touch on within other subject matters, other modules, but not specifically so. But we are questioning whether we ought to be doing something more around that with, again, key partners. Online addiction, sexting is, again, because everything is much more virtual now. So mobile phones, internet is always a concern for young people. So preventing radicalisation again, and kind of the online risks to children is something that clearly we're really mindful of. So that will inform our work going forwards. I just intend to conclude there, Chairman, and just open it up for any questions that councillors may have for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Two questions or points, really. Thinking about what we've all just lived through, I would have thought mental health would be something you're going to want to be doing. It's all right to not be all right type thing, whether you're a teenager, small child or whatever. And also, is it offered in private schools? You say it's offered to secondary schools. Does that include private schools all over the county? Thank you.
Thank you. Claire. I think you're on mute, Claire.
Apologies. Okay, thank you, Councillor Sneath. A really good question. And as you were saying, mental health, we appreciate in terms of children and young people's emotional well-being is a really important issue. There are some interventions that already take place within schools around that. And I suppose that's why I say this is just about ensuring that we're working in a joined up way and not replicating what may already be taking place within schools. So we're going to be kind of doing that as a partnership piece of work. The offer, the Stay Safe offer, is an offer that's available to all schools. So academies, we do it to prudential schools, to the secure estate. So wherever there's a child or young person in a learning environment, it's available. The take-up varies, I should say, in terms of private schools. I think that's a difference. We have a greater take-up, I think, in secondary schools, but we do advertise it, and we're quite proactive in reaching out to every kind of school to promote what we offer and encourage the school to take up that offer. So yes, it is available to all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to commend the work that's been done. And when you think we've just lived through COVID and it actually hasn't gone away, there are still plenty of people in hospitals and in the community, and the mental health of youngsters in our community has got to be a priority. So well done for what they've done here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just 2 points probably for consideration. The first one, I think the schools, in my opinion, should start working with families and parents. The reason why I'm saying that, because there is a lot of grooming going in schools, and I think the parents probably, they will be the first people to spot any change of behavior in their kids. If it's spotted, then they have to contact the schools and communicate with the school and talk about the issue. If it's spotted at first in the school should again get in contact with the parents and tell them what's happening. Because if we work with parents, I think we can tackle the problems at the beginning. Because if we wait probably for a week or two or few days, it may be too late. That's one thing. Secondly, when we used to live in London, one of the schools introduced a scanner. So all students passed through the scanner because the knife crime was getting high in London. So I think it should be considered in our schools. If there is a knife crime in some schools in the county, probably a scanner will be good, because that will make the kids think twice if they bring any sharp object with them to school. I would probably be happy if they consider these points. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Claire, your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Danny. We do engage with parents. Really, I think that's something in the years to come we want to do more of, and we've only not done as much of that really because of our capacity. But actually, during lockdown, we were able to develop that area of our business. And so we did create and we held some webinars for parents in evenings, and we offer some online resources and input for parents, because what we do know when we have those conversations with parents is some feel well educated around some of these subject areas, particularly about the online world, and others will be honest and open and say, my children know far more than I do, and I don't feel very well equipped to police their activity online because I don't really know much about it. So we are very keen to involve parents in this conversation, because they are a critical part of obviously keeping their children safe. So absolutely, that's that they're part of that conversation at the moment, and will increasingly be as we move forward. I would say in terms of knife crime, sometimes I think, I mean, you know, for Lincolnshire, it's not the issue that you will see in other areas, but that nevertheless sometimes there's the fear of knife crime that children feel because they hear about it in the media and such like. So sometimes it's a concern as to whether anybody's carrying a weapon, as to whether anybody actually is. And so, you know, so even if it's a fear of that, that's something that we didn't ought to turn a blind eye to. So it is about, you know, ensuring that we're realistic about that, and that we don't, what's the word? We don't set hairs racing, but equally, this, you know, all that we do is about giving people the information so that they can make informed choices, and they're just much more better educated as they kind of grow up and particularly move into adulthood. And we hope they take those, and they certainly tell us through the feedback that they do take those messages on board. So, yeah, I don't know whether that answers Councillor Danny's questions, but.
Yeah, Councillor Danny wishes to come back. So, Councillor Danny.
I did ask if you may consider probably introducing scanners in probably the schools, which is they have a high probably knife crime, or people talk about the knife crime in the schools. That's what was my question. If you can consider that.
Yeah, Councillor Danny, that wouldn't be something that would be within my area of remit that would be for schools to consider as to whether they felt scanners would be necessary and an appropriate and proportionate response, I would say, to the issues or not that they may have in their area. I do attend meetings though, Councillor Danny, with governors and such like, and I can certainly share your suggestion in those forums.
Thank you. I can see why Councillor Danny raised that with a heading as Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee. And I guess it's something we need to be vigilant at all times. In fact, I think there was a bomb scare at 3 South Lincolnshire schools only yesterday. So just need to be aware and vigilant of these things. I think Councillor Danny wanted to come back.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to come back. One more thing I want to touch on is, and I'm talking about Boston and what I see in Boston because I don't hang at night in Lincoln. Last Friday, I was having dinner outside, and I left the place around 11 o'clock. It was a group of underage kids on bicycles, walking around, smoking. And that kind of behavior, it's like giving them the green light to do that at night. So there's nobody talking, there's no police around. Do you get in touch with the schools and discuss these issues that the parents are responsible for their kids after the school times, and there is a certain limit of time where they can be outside? Because if they feel that freedom, and if the freedom is in their hands to hang around until midnight and they're only 13, 14, smoking and probably breaking things, touching things, shouting, fighting, do you get in contact with schools and discuss these issues? Thank you.
Claire, some of those comments we may not be the appropriate committee for that, but I'd like to gauge your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Pepper. So I suppose some of what you're describing may then touch on, you might be describing what may be considered to be antisocial behaviour. We do work around antisocial behaviour within the community safety team. And I think there'll be a paper at some point to this committee on that subject in due course. So we do have various forums, partnership forums where antisocial behaviour and incidences of that, and individuals who repeatedly commit incidences of antisocial behaviour with our district colleagues and other partners. We do manage that. So I suppose I'd say it's probably not a matter for now, but to reassure you that those kinds of issues are raised. And again, we are very, we agree with you, and we do stress to parents that their responsibility in terms of parenting their children. And there's only so much we can do to support them with that. And as I say, so that's why we do have that kind of conversation with parents, and we do involve them in the work that we do, because they're a really critical part in the solution, I suppose. So, but yeah, perhaps I could develop that response, Chairman, in the paper that we'll have in the work programme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire, the timescale for disclosures is relatively short, as we can see in the report, 2018, 2019, so two to 3 years. Is there any particular trend there? Does it seem to be decreasing in that time, or increasing, or anything else you can tell us about that, please?
In terms of disclosures, by far our greatest disclosures are when we deliver the healthy relationships work. So depending on the age of the children and young people, the nature of that delivery varies, because some of that is looking at friendships and relationships kind of with, you know, families and with friends. And then as those children are older, then our messaging is more, moves into, when you start forming intimate relationships, but also you're experiencing what relationships you're experiencing within the home setting, within family. And so by far the greatest number we have are where people are disclosing domestic abuse, which is one of the reasons why we make a conscious decision to co-deliver that session with our specialist commissioned domestic abuse support services in the county, so that we have somebody who's an expert in managing that disclosure, and then being able to support both the young person, and then if they've disclosed that perhaps one or both parents are experiencing domestic abuse, to reach out to the parents as well. What we have found is that incrementally those disclosures are going up. You will, and I think it's certainly no surprise, I think, to our specialist providers that more person is. So children tend to disclose more than the teenagers. Some of that might be because, you know, the teenagers are a bit more guarded about what they say, whereas, you know, the young person doesn't appreciate perhaps that what they're saying is unusual because that's their normal, what they're describing. So we're really pleased to see, as I say, it's not just the pupils. Actually, we do get some teachers who are obviously present when we deliver that work, who you know, are quite upset and can be quite traumatised by the material because of their own experiences, either past or present. So, but it's not just that online safety work that we do. We have a lot of disclosures about from young people who may be experiencing online bullying. That's becoming, you know, particularly a particular kind of another standout area in terms of disclosures. But those are increasing, I suppose, but that may just be because the volume of delivery is increasing. But we've only just been tracking, if you like, and keeping a record of those incidences of disclosure, because to me, that's another really important point to why we do this work. I don't know whether that answers your question, Chairman, but...
Yeah, I think it answered over and above of what I requested. Any further questions? No. So thank you, Claire, for that report. This committee is invited to consider and comment on the contents of this report and approve the continued delivery of the Stay Safe project in the proposed format. Again, I'm going to move that we endorse the report and approve the continued delivery of the Stay Safe project, and that our comments, as recorded, be taken into account. Can you raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Thank you. That now brings us to the end of the meeting, so thank you for your participation and input and your attendance. Thank you very much.